I'm here with Adrienne Nolan Smith, who's the founder of Wellbe, and she's also a board-certified patient advocate. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Nikki.
Thank you. I've actually known about Wellbe for probably a couple years now. Maybe, I don't know when you launched, but someone reached out from your team and I thought what you were doing was so interesting, and I just didn't make it out here because I had a baby and I wasn't traveling to New York for a little bit. So I'm so happy that we're here together finally.
Me too. Yeah, I have known about the Fullest for a really long time as well. We launched just over 2 years ago, so July 2017. And I actually ended up writing a piece for the Fullest. Maybe a year ago or something. So It's been on my mind to get to meet you at some point. So it's definitely a pleasure.
Nice to meet you. So I have to ask, what's a board certified patient advocate?
Yeah, no problem. There's actually only a couple hundred of us in the country at this point, and it's a very new board certification. I think I was in the first class of people that actually sat for the board exam. It felt like taking my SATs. I had to go to some weird place in Midtown with like a computer generated system for the testing.
And for education, like you had to do a program and then do the testing, or?
Well, it was very interesting. There were study materials, but I had worked in the healthcare system with hospitals for 3 years before leading to found Wellbe, and so I decided to take this board exam mostly because I had all this knowledge from working with hospital clients over those 3 years, a lot about Medicaid, Medicare, a lot of a government program called Disrupt I sort of oversaw for my company, and it was basically all trying to help our hospital clients to reduce hospital readmissions for different chronic diseases and also manage chronic disease patients, which is really ironic because now what I know is that if you just kind of throw prescriptions and follow appointments at people with chronic conditions, they kind of never actually heal those chronic conditions, and maybe they can kind of stay at that level, but likely they will continue to decline. And so it was really hard for me in those 3 years to not kind of feel like I was screaming and nobody could hear me.
I wouldn't be able to handle that.
It was pretty depressing, I have to say. There were a lot of Sundays where I was just like totally gloomy and gray about the ability, seeing what the problems were and feeling like my hands were tied and really being able to impact the change that I knew was needed. That being said, I was able to learn so much about the system and how it works now and why and how it's broken. I knew and I thought I had all the knowledge about how it was broken from the patient and caretaker perspective.
And let's take a step back. This is before your certification, right? This is your knowledge because that's why you went for the certification. But This is also because I believe there's a story about your mom, right?
Yeah.
So is that how you had this experience, or like?
Right. So I could back all the way up, but it's kind of a long story. It spans about 20 years. My introduction to all things health and wellness was really started with my chronic Lyme diagnosis when I was 11, which kind of took my whole family into living a very different lifestyle because once the antibiotics didn't alleviate the symptoms, we were given no real other options and kind of sent down this path of like, good luck. And luckily my mom, had no biases and just was really a ferocious researcher. And so she figured out all of these different integrative and natural therapies that could work to restore my immune system and fight and, pull off Lyme and this, that. So 2 years of lots of crazy stuff later, I was free of Lyme symptoms and have been for, since I was 13. So that was a major...
You need to write a whole book on just that.
I know, I'm trying very quickly because that's one of 3 things that is part of the story. I'm just glossing right over that. But that, and then fast forward to when I went away to college, I ended up having amenorrhea just 6 months after getting there, which is a loss of menstruation, which lasted for 2 years. And I had, considered myself a healthy kid from, age 13 to 18, didn't really utilize natural health therapies and things like that, or integrative or functional medicine, except just kind of how we lived at home, right? We didn't really, we called it wheat-free, we didn't eat wheat, nobody talked about gluten. We were eating, we stayed away from dairy, things like that. But I took a lot of supplements and a lot of like Chinese herbs and things.
So you were, but it wasn't like you had to think about it all the time. It was just how you lived.
Right. I wasn't going to doctors. The way that you are like actively doing that in healthcare episodes, you know, where you're really trying to get to a diagnosis, or you have one and you're trying to figure out how to heal, which is a whole different, very time-consuming and frustrating experience. So then I was back in that when I was, you know, I gave it about a year thinking, oh, maybe it'll come back. And I started to finally see all these different, you know, of course, our natural bias in America is to first go to the conventional. So I went to the top doctors. I was at Johns Hopkins for college, so I was going to Hopkins doctors. I was going back to New York and, you know, getting into these really fancy OBGYNs and endocrinologists and that. And it was the same answer everywhere, which is basically birth control pill. Yeah. And we can't find anything wrong with you. And, you know, maybe you're stressed. And I was like, I'm having the time of my life in college. Like, I am not stressed. Like, and so, you know, I finally knew enough based on my Lyme experience to say, okay, this is not an actual solution. You're not, you know, the birth control pill is not getting to the reason of why my body is not doing what it is fundamentally built to do as a woman, which is to get a monthly period. So thank you very much, but no thank you. And I ended up working with a naturopath, and she, you know, gave me a program and looked at my blood work so differently. And about 6 months later of, you know, again, like a lot of different Chinese herbs and supplements and changing my diet very drastically. And then also this kind of acupuncture program she did 6 months and a day later, and that's how long she said it would take. It came back, and it's been, you know, normal for 14 years or whatever. And that was like my big like strike two of like, you know, because again, I never expected to work in health or wellness as an actual career path. It was just something that I, you know, had gone through these things and it was now an interest of mine. And
what were you studying?
I was studying international relations at Hopkins, and I was just telling somebody today, I thought I was going to be a journalist that went and covered the Beijing Olympics, because I was, I had lived in China like 3 different times throughout high school and college, and so I just thought this was like, that was, you know, I wanted to do something with my Chinese, so that's what I would do. Or I was going to be a CIA agent, because, you know, Chinese espionage seemed like a second, second choice.
Well, you can still do that. That's the nice thing.
I remember I started filling out the CIA like internship application online and was like, I could get killed. I think maybe I should not do this. But the most impactful reason, and the reason I've done everything that I've done now with Wellbe and patient advocacy and everything else, it was my mom's death, and before that, her 3.5 years of being in the mental health care system. She had a manic episode when I was the summer after I graduated from college, and we actually had to put her in the back of a police car and send her away with, you know, middle of the night situation. She had run away from us, very, you know, thought we were trying to kill her, run through the subway system. We chased her to Queens. Like, it was like out of a movie.
What sparked that?
It had been derailing for a couple of years before that, but she and my dad had divorced, and so I was away at college, and she was staying with a sister in Florida, and so I wasn't seeing how bad it had gotten. And then we were all supposed to be together, and then it just was like, you know, obvious that she was really paranoid. Yeah. So she had this big manic episode, and she was then thrown into this, you know, city, kind of feels like a jail, but it's a mental, you know, health facility. And I'd never experienced anything within this part of healthcare. Most people don't, and it is really terrifying. I mean, it is like prison. It feels like the opposite of a healing environment.
Yeah.
And so, you know, because my parents had divorced, and I'm the only girl in my family, and, you know, my older brother, whatever, I was the one who was sort of in charge of her care and had wanted to be involved with the doctors and stuff. And
did you have a good relationship? I mean, it sounded like with your Lyme's, like she really took control of like helping. So I'm curious.
Well, I mean, as soon as she was sick in this acute way, and everything that she had taught me about health and getting to the root cause and working with people who really want to listen and want to heal and not just manage symptoms or, you know, get out quickly so they can see the next patient. I knew immediately, like, I owed it to her to give her a similar kind of care and fight for her, but the system was so all-consuming of you. Once you are put on these antipsychotics and mood stabilizers, and it's very hard to pry you out of that system, because there's also a lot of legal stuff that comes up with guardianship, and then you're in charge of their finances and actions, and it's a very weird system. And so you really feel like you can't take them off drugs like that because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And also because the state is involved, right? And that part is very intimidating, I think, especially as a 22-year-old girl when I was going through it. But also because nobody gave us other solutions. Like, I kept bringing research that I had found, digging around in PubMed, and it's kind of how I ended up, a big part of what I do at Wellbe is a lot of covering of health research, and I don't know if I would be quite as comfortable reading a lot of clinical trials and studies if I hadn't been through that experience. But I was bringing, small studies of 15 people, 2003, that, where they'd injected fish oil with these schizophrenic patients, and they had this, incredible recovery. And I would be like, can we try this? Like, who is this doctor? Like, let's find him. Like, we don't care. I mean, her quality of life was so terrible. Yeah. She was drooling. She was shaking. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't maintain a normal weight. She was slurring all of her words. Because, you're a complete vegetable on these drugs. Each drug that she was on had, 20 side effects. And then they're giving you
a bunch
sleep meds for the sleep problem it causes. And they're giving you other drugs for the, constipation, digestion issues they cause. And it was just like a whack-a-mole. Like, that's how I thought of it. And so I knew it was not the right thing, but it was like we couldn't get out. It was like a tidal wave of like.
Yeah, you had to stay in because of all the liabilities and everything that was going on, and the state she was in, and you wouldn't be able to take care of her by yourself. But then she was not really
and a couple of times, because she felt so awful on the drugs, she would try to go off of them and actually have a relapse. So that made me even more scared to try to figure out something else. But there was nobody even a little bit interested in trying to connect the dots of other health issues that she had. Because I knew, being, with her for the 25 years that I was, that she had loads of gut trouble. She had a lot of emotional childhood trauma from an alcoholic mother and a lot of other stuff. She had, had this trauma of the divorce too, which kind of triggered a lot of this kind of mania. Yeah. And also, active like Epstein-Barr and chronic fatigue and all these things. It was so obvious that the gut-brain connection was so strong, and nobody was trying to heal any of that. It was just like, throw more drugs. And so
it's so backwards.
It was very backwards. But again, it felt like we couldn't get out of it. So December 2010, I was actually applying to business school because I was, working at IBM, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and I knew I didn't want to stay there. And so, like a lot of 25-year-olds, I thought, I'll just apply to business school and kind of, figure it out from there. And I had about 2 weeks off till my applications were due, and she took her life. And so
I'm sorry.
Thank you. It was like a very pivotal moment where I threw out the essays I had written. I didn't think I was going to apply at all. And my friends were really great and just kind of like, no, come on, you're so close. You've got all the recommendations, you got everything ready. You just have to finish these essays and get them out the door. And I decided at that point that I was going to change my whole career trajectory and work on, changing the healthcare system and empowering people to not have the experience that I did, both with, chronic health issues like Lyme and amenorrhea and things like that, and not having to go to 12 doctors that talk about birth control before they get one person who says, let's use diet first, which is like not only going to help 9 other things in your body and life, but like much more sustainable solution. And it seems obvious to me. And so, both with the more, chronic health issues that don't seem like they're life-threatening, right? I mean, untreated for long enough,
Yeah.
they could be per se, but as well as when people are in these really insane health crises, to have someone or to have resources or something to just say, like, hang on, we're going to get a lot more opinions, we're going to find this research, we're going to get to the right people, we're going to only talk to people who are willing to look at my body or my family member's body as a whole system that's completely connected, and put the pieces together to figure out an actual healing path, not just like a symptom management path. So that's after I went to business school, I worked in healthcare technology with hospitals, as I was talking about. So that's
where the frustration kind of had started, though.
Yes.
Yeah,
for sure.
where you would see things and you'd say things, but they wouldn't.
It all came from this more personal experience, and I did think there was like a sliver of hope that maybe I could, change it from the inside, working in healthcare technology, but no. The system is so broken in so many different ways that one improvement, which they are starting to make some improvements, which I saw towards the end of when I was working with hospitals, that for instance, the change from value-based or from fee-for-service to value-based care with some Medicaid and Medicare initiatives, which is actually about 2/3 of all healthcare spending in the U.S. is actually our government. So when people say we don't have a socialized healthcare system, I'm sort of like, we kind of do.
Yeah.
But the good part about that is that when they start to see something that they think could help the whole system, they have a lot of buying power, right? They're paying 2/3 of everyone's, 2/3 of the cost. So they started to put forth these proposals and projects and initiatives all around trying to reward hospitals for value-based care, meaning the health outcomes of the patients that came through rather than just how much they billed.
Okay.
Which is the majority of healthcare still, is all fee-for-service. But these were kind of like pilot programs that I was lucky enough to work on from the technology perspective. And so I was like really gung-ho on them, and they've had tremendous results. The problem is that, from somebody I know still working in healthcare technology, the hospitals are not making enough money because they're working so well.
Yeah.
And so once the grants dry up or the initiatives might end or whatever it might be, they're worried. And
because they're not able to have
they
more sick
need
people,
to
or what?
they need to understand the money that they're going to have to work with the whole following year, and they have some of these publicly traded companies, they have fiduciary duties to their investors, and they have responsibilities to their board, and the CEO doesn't want to get fired and this and that, so they're like kind of maybe backtracking a little bit because they're worried about where that goes once the government stops being like, we got you, we'll help you. It's very screwed up. So, but there's some progress in that area as far as, rewarding care providers for actually who is healthiest at the end of a hospital stay and doesn't come back.
So what you're saying, I just want to repeat this, is that the value-based system that the government gives grants out right now, right, and incentivizing these hospitals, that if that dries up or if they stop doing that, these hospitals are afraid that going that route or using that type of a system means that they don't have as sick of people, which means the fee-for-service isn't bringing in enough revenue.
Exactly, yeah. And the programs and initiatives that CMS, which is Center for Medicaid, Medicare, have been doing the last couple of years, they do have a time limit. And one that I worked on, it was called District, it was renewed, but the end of that is now here. So there's just a lot of uncertainty. And so if you're a hospital executive and really your bottom line and how much revenue you bring in is really whether or not you're gonna stay in your job. You're pretty worried about, well, if the government goes away, and now we've put in the system that helps people to actually
feel better.
Get a little bit better from their chronic illness such that they're not coming back constantly, or that we give them more support in a way to try to heal outside of the hospital. What are we going to do for revenue? We have to fill the hospital beds. They have to be full. So it's very tricky. And
it's such a lacking a mentality of lack, though, because there's always, even healthy people get sick, right? But it's why not? Because I see it as we don't have enough room to help people who really need it, right? Like right now, if you go in the emergency room, I always hear about stories where there's just like lines of people just trying to get in, but it's hard because there's so many sick people and not enough room.
Yeah, it's tricky because there's the whole like who's paying for it.
Yeah.
So that's the problem too, is that if people are coming to the hospital who can't really pay, and they're not, even when they send the bills and stuff, they're just gonna default. They're not gonna pay. The hospital doesn't really want they that. Have to treat them, but they don't really want that. So.
The whole
so it's
thing.
like they actually want just a specific, very sick but with enough money patient.
Yeah, the one that has enough money but doesn't. You don't want them to know about the integrative stuff. You just want them to stay chronically ill.
Yeah. I mean, it's a system that developed with a lot of mistakes over the last like 60, 70 years, and so it's not like there's one villain who's like the puppet orchestrator that's like the terrible person that's made this the way it is. It's like
the whole.
There was like a confluence of 6, events or policies. A lot of it was government driven, where they thought they were doing the right thing in the moment, and it had completely unforeseen consequences that made this a complete mess. And if they could look back, they may have never done it, but it's too late.
Yeah, they just kept creating things that solved the problem but not the root cause. They just kept making band-aids, and then now they see themselves in a situation where they can't imagine any other way.
Exactly.
And I think that also is part of the problem right now. I mean, definitely part of the problem right now, but it's like in our system where we want healthcare for all, it's I love Marianne Williamson because she always says it's sick care. Like, we have sick care. We don't have any preventative care. And so that our current healthcare system isn't helping very many people, even if they have access to it. Like, that's great, but they're being told to do things that isn't right for them.
100%. I agree with her on that. 100%. And it's very tricky for me because when I hear people say healthcare for all, that is my immediate thought is you just want to give this like prescription to everybody. Like, no, this is not actually, I mean, sure, life-saving emergency medicine, we would like to make that accessible to everyone, for all people, but with 80% of all of our healthcare issues and costs in this country, I think it's actually maybe 85 at this point, being related to chronic conditions, the healthcare for all is going to make it worse. Because you just keep coming back and they keep steroids and antibiotics and just antidepressant and this, so no one's going to actually work on healing anything with you. And with the rates of medical error that we have in this country and over-treatment, you're actually maybe making a problem worse. So the healthcare for all thing is so tricky for me to talk about, and I also often
we
ask,
need more people like you though to talk about that, because I don't think it's even in like people that want that, which I think is great. Like you said, it's great to have for emergency situations and stuff, but not for chronic conditions. And people that want that, I don't even think this idea is in their realm. Like, they've never even thought about that.
They haven't thought it through enough. And unfortunately, I've been like living it for long enough and working in it that I'm like aware of the complexity of the situation. And so anytime somebody says that to me, I'm like, would you want to have the worst service in a restaurant, for example, the worst place you've ever been? Imagine the place where everything's dirty, there's you see the mouse running across the floor, they're rude to you, they're, whatever it is. Do you want that for everyone? Or do you want a system where it's actually empowering to patients and people are in control of their own health? They finally become the CEO of their own bodies, and therefore they need less emergency medicine, and they don't even need it because they're able to live on their own. Like, organic food for all, I'm for that. I mean, that's the best medicine I can think of. But this kind of like access to a sick care system for everybody, if you think through it a little bit, you'll see that it's not the answer. And you really wouldn't want it. But it is very tricky because I see it's a similar situation to what I was talking about before with these other things that were government funded, where they were trying to solve one issue, but this had unforeseen consequences that they would, I think, deeply regret today. This is another example of that. It has such good intentions. But if you could fast forward and show the issues with it based on what we know about health and healing, you would actually feel
Exactly.
like, actually no, we did a different
It's like our involvement in the Middle East, basically. Like
exactly.
we're funding
help this one place,
but then they come
other
in,
issues.
Yeah, you help this one group, and then we give them guns, and then we do this, but then they revolt, and now we're against them, and it's like
we're like, we armed Al Qaeda.
Yeah,
oh God,
exactly.
or whatever. Of course you didn't mean to do that, but you just can't possibly predict all these things.
Yeah.
So they have to be really thoughtfully thought through. And the other thing I say, which I said to you, is the healthcare for all thing. We actually sort of already have in many ways a socialized healthcare system with how much of the government actually funds, our whole healthcare expenditure. So something else, a lot of people are like, oh, really? Like, they're not really aware if they're not on Medicare or Medicaid, how much of the American taxpayer money actually does go to that. So a lot of complexity.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go back to you for a little bit, because I know that, so you were explaining what a board certified patient advocate is. So with all that experience, you decided, like, is that what you're doing, is helping somewhat and the system kind of change their ways? Is that what that is?
So technically I'm licensed to basically navigate and advise and advocate for people in the healthcare system who are going through something, whether it's finding, trying to figure out a diagnosis, they don't even know what's wrong with them, or have one and are trying to, get the right kind of care to heal.
So you're someone that they would listen to when, like, normal, like me, my grandfather was in the hospital and he passed away, but I was kind of like the person that would go spend time with him during the day and try and bring him juice and stuff. In the hospital, nurses would get upset with me because they'd say his sodium, he was hospitalized for low sodium levels, and then they kept giving him more and more, but then he ended up dying from a heart attack. But I kept telling them that the sodium was making him sick, but they weren't listening to me. And he had a prior heart issue, and then he ended up dying from that.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, he was old, but like, it was really tragic. But it's like they weren't listening to me. Also, because I was young. I was 22. I was 22 when that was going on. So, in your scenario, they're listening to you at this point, or?
Right. So technically, it's kind of like I am licensed to be like a lawyer for somebody. I can go into the hospital room and speak on their behalf. I can, kind of fight for them in different situations. I can, demand second opinions, and it's like that.
That's amazing.
So it is kind of a cool thing. That being said, I'm not using it
to do that.
Yeah. I may in the future, but right now, because of Wellbe, which I built, which originally started just as content, I just knew that there was enough misinformation, or there weren't enough people that were actually aware of the root cause of a lot of these issues, both the problems with the actual conventional healthcare system, but also a lot of this kind of like stigma and dogma and woo-woo, whatever, that the conceptions about the wellness movement, and also the alternative medicine stuff, and just people are like vicious, like quacks and whatever. And I kind of wanted to show that, one, there's a lot of research actually in the wellness side of things. So when I hear that's not science, or that's not, there's no evidence to support, it drives me insane, because that's like what I do constantly. And also to show that, okay, the answer to a lot of the chronic healthcare, the whole chronic healthcare, the answer to the chronic health crisis in America, because that's what the majority of people die of, right, or are sick with all the time, is actually wellness. It's actually just being empowered to see that the 100 choices that you're making every single day are actually your healthcare. And that's 80 to 90% of what happens to you is actually predicted by what you do every single day.
Wow.
And that's really it. And then your interactions with the healthcare system at that point should be few and far between. And of course, emergency medicine aside, like, you better believe if I get hit by a car, I am
You're going to the hospital.
Give me the full brunt of the conventional healthcare system. I'm lucky to have it. But for the majority of things, that's not the case. And when you do interact with the healthcare system, it should be with partners, people that listen to you, who really have a root cause, like, resolution in mind, right? Meaning, like, no, you're not just going to indefinitely have diabetes. Like, we're going to heal you. We're going to move on from this, or depression or whatever it might be, which is really not how it's often approached now. So that's really my whole message with Wellbe and a lot of the content that I've built. And
I love that.
Is that, yeah, I mean, it's really in your hands, but then when you do have to get someone else involved, they really have to be, you know, looking at you as a whole body with, you know, interconnected systems and an intention to help you heal, not just like, here, take some of this for a while and get out of my office, you know. So that's what I've been working on.
And then you have something coming out, right?
Yes.
Spark,
so
is that what
it's called? Yeah, it's called the Wellbe Spark Health Program, which I, by the time this airs, you know, it hopefully will be a well-oiled machine. But it's been something I've been working on for all of 2019, and essentially it came out of, you know, with media, there's a lot of different ways to monetize it, and I knew that I had important things to say as far as that people just needed to have the awareness first, because, you know, just another app is not really going to change the mindset of a lot of people to think differently, or maybe that's never occurred to them before, or something like that. So I knew I wanted to start with content, but when it got to monetizing it, I realized that there were so many people asking me for help with writing into our website, especially on the patient advocacy stuff and recommendations for good functional medicine doctors, or also just making all these lifestyle changes. And I was so busy making all the content that I couldn't really help them.
Yeah.
And I started to realize, well, this is stupid. Like, my whole point
is to help
with this content is to get people to a point where they're actually ready to take action, and then I'm leaving them hanging without support. And so I decided to kind of change that up and built this program, which it's sort of a play on the Marie Kondo Spark Joy idea.
Cool.
And it's just, you know, it's an 8-week program that will kick off in January 2020 and take people through, I call it the most actionable health and wellness course ever created. Who knows if that's true, but I just got frustrated by the idea that there's so much content and there's so many things you could or should be doing for wellness.
Oh yeah.
And yet it's paralyzing. But research does show there's certain evidence-based lifestyle practices
that
help a lot for chronic disease prevention, and if you're dealing with something, to help, you know, kick it in the butt. So I wanted to just put those things into a program through these like 8 modules so that people could just take action on that stuff. And then if they wanted to do anything else with
their
saunas
life,
or whatever, fine, but just do this stuff first, and let's take the action in, you know, this, it's a 1 hour a week webinar, so it's like, that's it. There's no more like endless homework or worksheets, whatever. It's just, we're just taking the action and setting up a life and a home that actually, you know, sparks health, and getting rid of all the stuff that encourages disease, which we have so much information on what does. We just have to actually put it into practice. And there's a lot of brands out there to want to make it very hard for you to figure out what's, you know, causing disease and stuff. So
that's going to be huge. I'm so excited. I think that's so great. And I understand that too. With content, it's so hard because you want to stay, like, content is so important, and that's with us too. We just want to stay authentic and loyal to the message that we're providing, and we don't want to partner with just anyone, which also complicates things, because then, you know, you need to keep it going. So you have to look for different avenues to monetize and to keep you staying authentic. So for us, it's like products, and we launched a product called the Saffron Latte, which I'll have to talk to you about, because there's so much research, even on PubMed, about saffron as an antidepressant. So like 30 milligrams a day of saffron equivalent to people having taken Prozac, but it kicks in instantly instead of taking 6 weeks to kick in. And our saffron,
please send me all of this. This is fascinating.
You would love it. It's like 150 milligrams in one serving that we have, so 5 times the medicinal dose, but it's an adaptogen. So it's like an instant mood lifter. But we went the product route, so I totally get your route for this, and I just love it because it just makes so much sense, and I want to go through it, and I want to send everyone to it, because our whole philosophy is, like, there is too much information out there, and it's so important to be well, but also it's so important to take back your power and do the things that, for someone who is chronically ill or is going through something, like, do these certain things, but don't get stressed out about it either. And like you said, too much homework and this, and I need to go to the sauna and I need to do this. It's like, let's do the core things that we know feel good for us, and then, like, let's just also live our lives.
Right. And I mean, I think part of my inspiration for this came from, well, listening to a lot of my Wellbe, like, fans and what they were overwhelmed with, but also my own, like, if everything I wanted to do in the morning, I actually did for my, rituals and this, I wouldn't leave the house. 3 hour, and I kind of was like, okay, enough. Like, this is getting out of hand. There's just so many things you can add on. Like, what is actually research supported, and so can I just at least do those well? And then I can, the rest of the stuff, when maybe I feel like I can add something else on and I'm really comfortable with this, then I will. But other than that, I've got the foundation of a life that, sparks health, is what I was saying.
So exciting.
But a component of it, which brings back the patient advocacy thing, is also during the 8 weeks, having this little team that I've put together of sort of a health researcher, health coach, and patient advocate, which will be me in the beginning, to actually, any kind of thing that you have problems with, because everything is so customized and we're all very individual, like you're even with your lifestyle stuff and your health stuff, as far as healthcare issues and things you might be dealing with and where you are, right? Sometimes people are in LA and have access to tons of functional medicine type practitioners and doctors, and other times people really want, and they're in Duluth, North Dakota, and it's very hard. And how can they figure out how to get this kind of care while still being somewhere that isn't, quite full of a ton of them? So we'll be able to kind of be a wellness and health concierge for the 8 weeks to just help you get through all these little things, and deliver research on maybe something that you're going through and you're like, I am a busy new mom, I have no time to figure this out, but I've been having this weird rash, or I've just gotten a Hashimoto's diagnosis. Can you give me all the research that you need on this particular topic and break it down for me so that I can just like get the cliff notes and then do something about it? So something like that too. I need a gut specialist in North Dakota, that, or all of these things, because a health journey is very complicated, whether you're in great health or not. And so you need a lot of different things at different times, and people seem to have a ton of questions. And so I didn't feel like there was this support system in that way. And doctors, really, the way that the system is set up, they don't have time to be answering a million questions that a patient might have. They really have to just stick to the high level stuff, and having another resource that can kind of navigate you to the right people, or just like, here are the 3 things you might try. Like, here's what we've seen. Okay, alternative solutions to depression. Like, here's the research on saffron. Here's the research on healthy fats. Here's the research on, why don't you just try like these 3 things for a little bit and see if it doesn't make a difference, and we'll go from there. And I love the idea that you have already found research in PubMed about it, because I think proof is the best thing that we have. And it's not always easy to find. But it's so much better than just trusting that somebody knows what they're talking about. It's like, you can take my word for it, or you can take this, and I think that's great.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for what you guys are launching. And
thank you.
And I just really appreciate you coming here and sharing your story, and I can't wait to see what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a fun conversation. I feel like I could keep going with it for a while.
We'll have to have you on some of our upcoming panels for our conferences.
Oh, that would be awesome. I'd love to.